This is Matt 32 Boxing. Delighted to be joined by the one and only Andy Clarke. Andy, just going to have a quick catch up and review of what's gone on the last sort of 24 to 48 hours in what's been a sad day for boxing, but ultimately the right decision prevailed in the end.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree with that. And like you say, it was a really long, from the announcement that came from Wasserman and Matchroom kind of late morning to the fight being called off the next day. It was about 27, 28 hours, wasn't it? Something like that. But it just seemed like so much longer because so many things happened and the story moved on so quickly from being about an adverse finding, positive test, people wish to describe it, to very quickly becoming about will the fight go ahead or not, to the point where we almost kind of forgot to an extent what started all of this in the first place. It was incredible how quickly it moved, because you wouldn't really have envisioned a scenario where this could happen, but then the fight could potentially still go ahead. But then we all realized that that was a possibility because it was set out in the statement. So you've got all of that happening in the space of one page. And then the Board of Control said what they said an hour or so, 2 hours later, to add another layer to it. And then all of a sudden we're kind of in court, we're in legal ground, legal territory. But then in the end, I think what stopped it was kind of the court of public opinion, because from Matchroom's statement yesterday, they seemed to make it pretty clear that if they wanted to have pushed this harder and really gone for this and tried to force it through, maybe they could have. Now, we don't know whether that's true or not. I mean, maybe they could have, maybe they couldn't have, maybe they just hit a brick wall with it. It couldn't be done. And then the thing to do in that situation is to kind of say that you got to where you got to because you've got the best interest of the sport at heart and you didn't feel it was the right thing to force it through. So we don't really know which one of those two scenarios it was. And it might have been a mixture of the two. It could well have been a mixture of the two, but it's not happening. And I think it's the right thing that it's not happening.
How surprised were you with how long the decision came out to be sort of announced officially? Because from our understanding yesterday, it was that we had a lot of rumours about it going to the High Court. Eddie sort of cleared that up in the little media thing they did at the end and said, we haven't been in the High Courts, etc. So how surprised were you that it took so long to get announced? Because we had undercard fighters waiting in that hotel yesterday who were finding out after media and then packing the bags. Like, for them, it must have been a horrendous day. But how surprised were you with the length of time it took for the announcement?
It's just such an unusual state of affairs, just such an unusual sequence of events that you've not really got too much to compare it to be honest. So it's kind of hard to say. The extraordinary thing about it was that we learned of this adverse finding, and then we moved very quickly from that to realizing that this was a situation whereby the fight could still happen, which in itself seemed absolutely extraordinary. And then, like I said, that's what it became about. And I can understand once you get to that point that then making that decision is not easy, because this is a massive event. There's an enormous amount of money involved in it. And I think actually, if anything, because they had from whenever the board released their statement on I can't remember what day it was, on Wednesday, they had from then onwards, working hours wise, not that long to really get to the bottom of it all. So, you know, it felt like it lasted forever, but I'm not sure they could have done it all that much more quickly.
Well, we were sort of made to believe with interviews that we've all been a part of with Carla and everyone else that this test was something that failed late August, early September, but that teams were informed of these results, you know, prior to this event. So if they were made aware of it, surely the best thing to do would be to say, look, for whatever it's worth, let's get the B sample and make 100% sure and go from there. Because that's what everyone keeps asking for whenever these tests come out, a B sample. Now, my understanding is that's the same urine in a different cup. So is it going to show anything different, or do you just get it to rule it all out? What I want to know is, the question is, how does Conor Benn exonerate himself from this when he's had a failed test? Because that's what everyone's talking about, proving his innocence, giving him a chance. How can he prove his innocence? That's what I want to know.
Well, yeah, and that's what this now becomes about, because that's how this all started. That was the original story that started every single other chain in the events that we've seen since. And you're right about the samples. It's the same sample. It's the same urine. It's just split into two different tubes, two different beakers. And the reason you have the B sample essentially is as a backup for the A. If the A gets lost or contaminated or tampered with after the event of collection, then you've got the B sample. So the B sample is not going to be different unless one of those things has happened, unless it's been contaminated or unless it's been tampered with. So that's the only way it can be different. So the vast majority of the time, 99.9% of the time, it will be the same. So it's going to return that same result. And at that point, then he has got a lot of questions to answer. How did it get there? Because we've all read about this substance, and it's not something that can appear in your system via contaminated meat or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not. That's not what this is. So he's got to explain how it got there.
I'm right in thinking this is like a tab. This would be like a tablet. This would be like it's for fertility, isn't it? For women who are trying to get pregnant. That's what I've been told by reading it. So it's not like this could get mixed up into anything.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. You wouldn't have thought so. And he's got to explain it. He's got to come out and explain it. It doesn't look good. There's no point sugarcoating it. It doesn't look good. He has to be given his opportunity to explain what has happened and how it has happened, but it doesn't look good. And it looks doubly bad when you consider what this fight was, which was a middleweight coming down to 157 pounds. By his reckoning, would have been operating at 60% of his capacity.
Oh, yeah.
Exaggerating a bit there, but he probably wouldn't even really know how much it would have weakened him until he'd actually done it and got to the night. So you've got him, and then you've got somebody coming out of the other corner who has failed the test.
Yeah, what got me is when there was almost like there was talks of this potentially still happening after the test. That's what the sort of vibes everyone was getting, and it was like these two families. Gareth Ayres made a terrific point. These two families have both seen fighters, families that they've all been involved in, and not because they were taking anything, but where lives have been changed permanently. We talk about Nick Blackwell, Michael Watson, Gerald McLennan, all these people that have seen the effects of boxing. This shouldn't be difficult. What I want to know is, in terms of if the sort of boot was on the other foot, Junior, the naturally bigger man, if he'd have tested positive, do you think, for me, I would have thought this would have been dealt with a lot quicker, because he's going in there with the natural advantage. Do you think that played a part in maybe how long it took to delay calling off this fight? The fact that Junior was coming in naturally bigger?
Maybe, because you did hear kind of rumours that behind the scenes, that some of the ongoing discussions were regarding weight and the rehydration clause and everything like that. But that's just completely wrong. Like that should never have been entertained at all, because the main reason why this could never go ahead, and it would have been a potential disaster if it had gone ahead. And a lot of people made this point straight away. Matt Macklin made this point to me straight away when we spoke about it on the day, which is that what happens if Conor Benn knocks Chris Eubank out and he suffers some kind of injury. We all know that doesn't happen, thank God, in boxing all that often, but we all know that it does happen. And if you go ahead with this fight, you would have been taking that risk. You would have been gambling on that not happening. And that, for me, was always the main reason why, the common sense reason why it couldn't happen. There's just so much.
Yeah.
Much to unpick here, and so many questions still to be answered.
I think more will come out in the coming weeks. Hopefully we get some sort of conclusion to it, and one that makes sense to everybody. Fingers crossed. Look, Andy, I know you're pressed for time. Thanks for giving me a few minutes. Not a great sort of weekend for boxing, but hopefully things become more clear in coming weeks. So, Andy Clarke, thanks for talking to Into Boxing. And we'll catch up again on the next fight week.
Will do. Cheers.
Appreciate it.